All right, well, I know that some folks might be coming in and out, but let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, it's almost afternoon, still morning. Thank you so much for joining me to hear about a project that we've been working on to try to understand and anticipate what the region's needs for post-secondary education will be within the coming decade. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sorrel Stielstra, and I'm the Director of Research for GIA. And I'm excited to share this project with all of you. And because it's an exploratory project, I'm also eager to hear any feedback or thoughts, suggestions that some of you might have for ways to improve it and strengthen it. If you don't mind holding your questions, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So the idea for this project first originated when one of our board members, Dr. Woldot Isak, wondered what would be the impact on local colleges and universities if every high school student in the IE took some dual enrollment courses, possibly even a whole year's worth of college credit. We haven't modeled that yet, but it did prompt us to think about current college enrollment and attainment and whether we could accommodate increased demand based on the success of current educational initiatives in the region, as well as the desire to meet statewide and regional attainment goals. Before we talk about where we hope to get in the next 10 years and how we think our tool can help us anticipate that, I want to briefly review our current educational landscape. You probably heard Carlos this morning mention that of the largest metropolitan statistical areas, the 50 largest ones in the US, the IE has the lowest educational attainment rate, with only 30% of the population having an AA degree or above, compared to around 44% in California as a whole. We need to greatly increase our attainment if we want to meet the goal that Governor Newsom recently unveiled just earlier this year of 70% of Californians achieving a certificate AA or above in the next 5 years. We know that college graduates have better economic outcomes than those without a degree. College graduates have far lower rates of poverty, lower rates of unemployment, and higher wages than other workers with less education. And this is especially true in the face of increasing automation and during economic recessions, including COVID-19, which hit lower income workers the hardest. All of which is to suggest that college degrees have become increasingly valuable in California's labor market, and there's every reason to believe that these trends will continue into the future. Education undeniably improves the lives of individuals and their economic mobility. However, it's also a key tool in our regional efforts towards economic improvement in the IE as a whole. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, in 2030, California will fall over 1 million college graduates short of economic demand, a problem they and others call the workforce skills gap. And when we consider not just BAs, but also career and technical associate degrees and certificates, California Competes, a nonprofit specializing in higher ed and workforce policy research, predicts a shortfall of well over 2 million workers. And even the potential arrival of highly educated workers from outside the state is unlikely to be large enough to fill this workforce skills gap. And the gap here in the IE in particular is estimated to be over 60,000 for BAs and an additional 25,000 shortfall of workers with in-demand graduate degrees. It would behoove us to start planning now about how to address this workforce skills gap. At the same time as we have regional demand for workers to fill this workforce skills gap, we also have a lot of progress being made in preparing these future workers to be educated to do those jobs. And so before we talk about our model predicting post-secondary demand, I also want to just take some time to remind people about the great work we're collectively doing to prepare students for college and beyond. As many of you well know, educators and other community leaders from across the region are working really hard to improve the educational and labor market outcomes of our residents. And looking at a handful of efforts and measures of educational success, some like those on this slide, we can see that the long-term trajectory of educational preparedness in the IE looks promising. Even acknowledging that the challenges of 2020 and beyond due to COVID have presented real setbacks, the extent of which are not currently known or fully understood, the trends of recent years show progress across a range of measures, beginning with greater participation in preschool programs, increasing standardized test scores in grade school and middle school. Similarly, among high school students, we see steadily increasing graduation rates, along with completion of A to G coursework to be eligible for the UC and CSU systems, as well as increasing participation in college level dual or concurrent enrollment courses while students are still in high school. Not only that, but there are initiatives underway to greatly increase the support to high school seniors to fill out the FAFSA form and learn how much financial aid they qualify for, which we know is an important predictor of subsequent college enrollment. Many of you will be familiar with the recent landmark AB 705 legislation, which by maximizing student placement in transfer level rather than remedial coursework offers the possibility of transforming student experiences and outcomes by freeing them from remedial ruts that they can often get stuck in for years, which adds time and cost to degree or transfer and really reduces the chance that they ever will successfully complete. Other promising initiatives at the community college level include emphasis on associate degrees for transfer, the so-called degree with a guarantee, offering community college students a guaranteed admission to Cal State, as well as important work being done through the Guided Pathways framework and the Vision for Success goals to improve student outcomes at California community colleges and close achievement gaps across students and across regions in the whole state. One additional local initiative that you may not be aware of yet, although Carlos mentioned it briefly in his comments this morning, is College App. And this is actually being shared in a concurrent session right now, so you can go back and watch that video later. So we've just launched a partnership with College App, and this is a predictive analytics tool that can identify cohorts of individuals, specific people who are interested, who are likely interested in furthering their education. And this can be used to identify prospective students in the service areas of local community colleges. So our college partners can begin a targeted outreach program to prepare for these students and then inform them about the opportunities and benefits of returning to school. We have to acknowledge, of course, that we are currently struggling with 2 years of worrisome declining enrollments at the community colleges, and we're not certain yet how or when this will resolve. However, the fact remains that using College App, we anticipate that nearly 1 in 4 adults in the IE, 1 in 4 adults, this is a huge number, has an intent to enroll in higher education in the next 2 years. This is what College App can predict. So, and we now have the ability to reach out directly to these individuals who are likely to enroll and may need some additional information and supports to do so successfully. So all of this leads to the question that prompted us to begin this project in the first place. If regional education initiatives are as successful as we hope, and as we're working toward, what are the implications for our local colleges and universities in the coming years? So to begin answering this question, we partnered with a brilliant graduate student at Claremont Graduate University named Manish Shrivastava and built a tool that incorporates some of these factors and allows us to imagine possible future scenarios. This system dynamics methodology is used to model complex systems to formulate predictions based on key variables in the system. Now, while not as common yet in the field of education, this methodology is more widely applied in other social sciences, economics, and public health. And part of what excited Manish, the graduate student, about working with us on this project was the potential opportunity to share with a wider audience the power of applying this methodology to educational questions. I want to emphasize that a key element and strength of this tool is that it can be easily calibrated and updated to continuously improve projections based on changing assumptions, new information, or evolving circumstances, which is helpful given the dynamic nature of our current reality. In fact, as I'll explain a little later, we initially built the model and then subsequently refined it several times through consultation and collaboration with regional stakeholders and partners. And moving forward, we welcome further discussion, collaboration, and input from other partners, such as you all here today, to continuously improve the accuracy of these projections. Okay, what you see here is a screenshot of the actual model of the interactive projection tool, which developed by the CGU grad student. It uses the NetLogo software package, which is an open platform programmable modeling environment. And I don't expect you to be able to see it in detail, and we'll look at a simplified version in a minute, but I just wanted to give you a feel for what the data and the simulation look like, as well as you can see the tiny red sliders in each box, and they can be adjusted to move the ratios up and down based on the information you want entered to make the predictions. Any folks who want to learn more details about the tool and methods can contact me for further conversation. We can include Manish in the conversation and go into far more depth about the technical details. But basically what we attempted to do is create a model that mirrors components of the IE education system, showing the various post-secondary paths that high school students and adult learners can take. The data and the variables used in the model are mostly publicly available from the US Census, from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office, the Data Mart, and the California Department of Education downloadable data files. I say mostly because, as I'll explain in a minute, we ended up refining the model a bit after sharing preliminary findings with partners in the region, and this required access to some data that are not publicly available. Okay, so here is the simplified version of the model. As you can see, it considers several different student pipelines flowing from high school graduation. So the first pipeline is comprised of high school graduates who are A to G ready and who enroll directly into a four-year degree program. The second pipeline combines high school graduates who are both A to G ready and not A to G ready, who attend community college. And then some of them then transfer into the four-year programs. Lastly, we have adult learners, and those are defined as students aged 20 and above who enroll in either a two-year or a four-year degree program. So now that you have a sense for the model, I want to share an overview of the three scenarios we created to predict possible college demand in the next 10 years. Our work builds on a report published by the College Futures Foundation in 2019 that lays the groundwork for understanding higher education capacity and demand challenges in the next decade using historical enrollment patterns for new college students and assuming incremental improvements in student academic preparation. So their report anticipates annual growth of about 10% of high school students being prepared to enter a bachelor's degree program. In other words, incremental increases in A to G readiness. Our project expands on this work by developing estimates of demand under several different scenarios that you see on the slide. We have baseline, medium, and high success. For the baseline model, we use current rates from the past couple of years of A to G completion in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, current rates of transfer from local community colleges, those are our 12 IE community colleges, to four-year universities. And this includes both the high school pipeline and the adult enrollments in community college. And lastly, current rates of adult learners enrollment for people seeking both 2- and 4-year degrees. You'll note that the adult learner rates remain static in all three scenarios. Since we had no specific initiatives or policy reforms that would inform or suggest plausible changes in rates to enter into the different scenarios. Now, these could be modified if we want. If we're successful in reaching more adult learners, say through the College App program that I mentioned earlier, we could add that as a changing ratio in the three scenarios as well. The medium success model assumes that students in the IE achieve A to G rates comparable to students currently in the third quartile of California high school students, so students across the state. And community college students reach half the the California Community College Vision for Success transfer goal. That goal is a 35% increase in transfer to a UC or a CSU. Finally, the high success model. This assumes that IE high school students reach the highest current statewide rate of A to G completion, and that local community college students achieve the full Vision for Success goal, transfer goal, which again is 35% improvement. These different scenarios and are somewhat arbitrary in the sense that we decided what to, what we thought would, well, we know what baseline is, and we thought, well, what should be a medium success scenario? We looked for what students are doing and what the goals are. So they're somewhat arbitrary, but because there's no correct ratios to include, but they're informed by good guesses based on current educational and policy initiatives and goals. I mentioned earlier that a strength of the tool is the fact that it can be modified. So I want to share a few examples of how the tool has evolved since we first started creating it. It's been quite a journey. The implications of the findings will be part of broader upcoming conversations that will include K-12, community college, and university partners in the region, hopefully some of you here today. And I'll talk about some possible implications at the end of the presentation. But what I really wanted to do is sort of share the process of the development of the tool and the thinking behind it. So that's why I want to include these revisions that were made. So shortly after we began building the tool, the pandemic hit. And based on previous research that had showed increasing enrollment patterns during economic recessions, we incorporated that element into the model. However, we observed that it turned out that the unemployment and enrollment patterns we anticipated based on the prior economic recessions differed substantially from current real-life conditions. As many of you are aware, while economic downturns typically result in increases in post-secondary enrollment, more people go back to school when the economy turns down. The opposite has been largely true for enrollment in the wake of COVID, especially at the beginning. And so because we're uncertain whether this pattern will persist or change course, COVID-19 related projections are not included in the model or report that we're writing. Now, they could always be reintegrated if we identify a sound reason for doing so, but the pattern has been sort of unpredictable, and so we felt like it didn't belong in the model at this point. A second modification we made had to do with some baseline numbers from the College Futures Foundation report that I mentioned earlier that we used to inform our model. When sharing our preliminary results with some college partners, they noticed that there were puzzlingly low estimates of community college enrollment in the model. And so we realized that some non-A to G ready high school grads had been incorrectly labeled. This is deep in the appendix of this College Futures report that we were drawing from. And adult learners had been mistakenly omitted from the two-year enrollment information altogether. So it resulted in erroneously low estimates of community college students in the model. This correction substantially changed our initial findings by increasing our prediction of demand at regional community colleges. So we revamped the model based on that. Lastly, and again, based on meeting with partners, when we said, we've got these initial results, does this look right? Does this seem, what do you make of this? Before we wanted to share it out, we wanted to sort of vet our findings with partners, and I'm really glad we did. So we tweaked the model yet again to reflect college-going patterns of IE students. So our general premise was that the greater the academic performance of high school and community college students, so with the A to G and the transfer readiness, the greater the demand that will be placed on regional post-secondary institutions. However, universities in the IE tend to have lower exclusive application rates than some other public institutions in the state. And it's likely that increasing student success in the IE will produce greater demand from IE students for university seats outside of the region as well, which somewhat counterintuitively could actually temper local demand. So our original assumption was that the greater the student preparation, the greater the demand. And we realized in conversation with our partners that we needed to account for this sort of desire to go out of the region. So to account for this in our projections, We added a parameter using National Student Clearinghouse Student Tracker college-going data that was shared with us, shared generously from the 2 county offices of education in the IE. And so we added that parameter estimating student desire to attend university out of the area. This modification reduced by quite a bit the predicted demand that we originally modeled for 4-year seats in the IE. Our original estimates were even larger than the ones that you'll see in a minute. So at long last, what does our model predict? Shown in this figure is the total demand for new college seats. We have it divided into 2-year and 4-year institutions and in the 3 scenarios, right? So you have the baseline, the medium, and the high success. Based on current post-secondary capacity in the IE and using the rates for each scenario that I described earlier, and of course, assuming enrollment trends return to normal following the COVID crisis, our model suggests that by 2030, the IE colleges and universities may not have enough seats for between 15,000 to 25,000 students for 4-year degrees and 7,000 to 14,000 for a 2-year degree. So again, I just looking at the totals of demand and then the capacity, subtracting those, we see a possible range of between 15,000 to 25,000 students seeking a 4-year degree without a spot, and 7,000 to 14,000 students seeking a 2-year degree without a slot. While fully reaching the highest success model and the highest demand may be unrealistic, in 10 years to get our students up to like the top A to G rate and achieving the full vision for success goals. College eligibility and demand at local universities will certainly steadily climb over the next decade. If maximally effective, these educational reforms may increase the demand for higher education in the Inland Empire to levels even greater than anticipated. And there may also be additional unanticipated future demand that isn't in the model for higher education among individuals who have lost jobs due to COVID. And once the virus has been controlled, those folks may want to seek more education. Despite this need, prior to the pandemic, Cal State San Bernardino, our region's top destination for students pursuing a bachelor's degree, was already impacted, receiving more applications from qualified freshmen and transfer students than can be admitted, including within areas of great regional need, such as healthcare fields and like nursing. So without intervention, this disparity between applications and slots will almost certainly keep widening. And yet, it's difficult to ignore that the historical context of this research has changed during the course of the pandemic, of the course of the project, due to the pandemic, the recession, and the shift of classes to online. So at the suggestion of one of our partners, we undertook a qualitative project this summer. We wanted to provide some additional context and student narrative to try to situate these findings. Some recent national reports have suggested that a question increasingly on people's minds is whether the return on investment in post-secondary education is worth it anymore. So we embarked on a project to learn a little bit more about what Inland Empire teens between the ages of 14 and 17 are thinking about as they're envisioning their futures and whether current circumstances might prompt them to reconsider their education plans. I don't have time to go into great depth about it here, but in summary, what we found is that while not all teens are certain that college is in their future, nearly all do see the value of college as it relates to future professional goals. Their understanding of the details about how the college process works, where they're likely to attend, where they're likely to live long-term, are not always realistic and often pretty vague. But all of these IE teenagers viewed college as something worthwhile. So what we took away from these findings is that there's no reason to believe that the quantitative predictions that we've been making for the future should be substantially tempered by current shifts in regional expectations and values around pursuing college. If anything, it reinforces that most students in the IE view college as part of their future, but they don't have enough knowledge to understand the best path to reach their goals. Now it's our job to expand college access and success and support these students as they pursue their dreams after high school. In closing, I want to remind everyone that the problem of impacted public universities in California is not new. Even as public education reforms have successfully prepared more students for college over the past quarter century, the CSU and UC systems have turned away an increasing number of students due to lack of funding, enrollment caps stipulated in California's master plan, and limited space, resulting in many tens of thousands of qualified students being denied access to higher education. According to the College Futures Foundation, in 2018 alone, 73,000 eligible students were turned away from the CSU and UC systems in California. And a growing number of California's high school graduates are leaving the state to attend college elsewhere, a brain drain the Inland Empire can ill afford. Notably, the impacts of these capacity constraints are not felt uniformly across the state, with regions most in need of increasing their population's educational attainment, like ours, facing the greatest gap between supply and demand. The Inland Empire has 13% of California's high school seniors, but only 7% of total seats available across community college, UC, CSU, and independent private colleges. So again, that's 13% of high school seniors live in the IE, and we have 7% of the total seats. Recent studies commissioned to examine the demand for and feasibility of a new campus in the CSU-UC systems have found that projected enrollments alone do not warrant the construction of new campuses, particularly in light of the expenses entailed in building a new site. These studies conclude that increased future enrollment growth can be accommodated at both CSU and UC systems through current long-range plans and by more efficient use of existing facilities, things like increasing summer enrollments, evening weekend classes, reducing non-California admissions, and expanding online coursework. And online learning had been growing already in recent years prior to COVID-19. And the last year and a half has accelerated this tremendously as most California colleges and universities transition to online learning. The further expansion of remote instruction offers one potential solution, potentially, for increasing access. However, even without capital expenditures for land and buildings, ensuring we have sufficient instructors, advisors, and other support staff will be challenging, given that salaries and benefits represent the greatest expenditures per student. Additionally, expanding online coursework entails considerable investments in course development, professional development, and technological capacity. Great care will also need to be taken to ensure that learning outcomes continue to show improvement and that online instruction does not widen equity gaps for racialized minority, first generation, or Pell Grant students. These investments in strengthening online instruction might have even more far-reaching impacts, not built into the models in this report, if improvements also facilitate the return of some of the nearly 25% of IE adults who have attained some college but no degree. Meeting the educational needs of the students in a region comprised of 2/3 people of color and majority Latinx, and where many families struggle with poverty and a dearth of living wage jobs, presents a critical issue of equity. The fact remains that whether done through expansion of physical space or operational capacity or some combination of the two, if we want to develop a well-trained workforce able to attract a more diverse industry base to balance out the disproportionately high percentage of low-paying and at-risk occupations, it's imperative that we start planning how to provide improved college access in the Inland Empire. Industries seeking to expand or relocate to new regions assess a number of factors, and the skill level of the local talent is an important consideration. The IE has shown itself to be open to and capable of innovation across all 12 community colleges, both public universities, and bi-county K-12 public school districts, and a network of support organizations working together toward educational systems reform. The long-term economic prospects and vitality of the IE, as well as the entire state, require us to start planning now how to address this shortfall. Stay tuned for future conversations where regional stakeholders will gather to discuss these ideas and possible plans in more depth. And again, please reach out if you'd like to get involved or learn more. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen in case people have some questions. Oh, do four-year capacity projections include private nonprofit? Yes, they do. I see that question from Darcy. That is a small, very small proportion of the numbers, however. All right, well, I think if nobody has any questions, anything else, I just want to thank you for joining me and reach out if you have any questions.